Hello and welcome everyone, and thank you for joining APMG and the Agile Business Consortium for this webinar on Agile Digital Services, or Agile DS for short. My name is Mark Constable. I'm with the APMG team and I'll introduce you to my co-presenters in a few moments. Before I do that, I'd like to start by covering a few housekeeping points for the session. So first of all, we are recording the session and everyone that's registered will receive a follow-up email from us soon after the webinar, as soon as we've got the recording and slides online. Secondly, you have an option to submit questions at any point during the webinar. I think unless you're on a mobile device, you should see an option to do that on your control panel. So feel free to send those in, and we'll keep an eye on those as we go. We welcome any feedback on the webinars as well, so positive or negative, that always helps us with planning and delivering webinars in the future. And just to notice as well, we've got a few polls throughout the session as well, so we've got two at the start and a further one at the end, so look out for those, and I'll warn everyone when those are coming up. So on to my co-presenters. I'm delighted to be joined by Jenny Bailey and Peter Stansbury. Jenny's from the Agile Business Consortium and Peter is the lead author of the Agile Digital Services Guidance. So Jenny and Peter, welcome along.
Hello Mark, hi.
Right, hello Mark.
Great to join you.
Absolutely, great to have you with us. So we're going for an interview style approach for this webinar. So Jenny will be quizzing Peter on the background and content of the Agile DS guidance, and later on I'll ask Peter a few questions about the supporting training and certification scheme. So before I hand things over to Jenny and Peter to get us started, a couple of quick polls to help us get to know the audience a little better. So the first one should be on your screen now, I think. So question is, are you involved in the design and or development of digital services? So we've got a few options there: yes frequently, yes occasionally, or no. Quite an even response here, guys. So we got, so that's most votes in, 38% yes frequently, 38% yes occasionally, and the remainder no. So thanks everyone for that one, and let's get the second poll up for you now. So this second question, are you familiar with the Government Digital Services and or the Agile PM framework? So are you familiar with either of those, both of those, or neither? So that should be on screen now. Quite a mixed response here, guys, as well. So most of the votes in, sort of hovering around 17–18%. I'm familiar with both. 10% familiar with GDS only, 45% familiar with Agile PM only, and around 29–30% unfamiliar with either. Great. Okay, thanks. That's all from me at this stage. So without further ado, I'll hand things over to Jenny to kick off questions on the background and content of Agile DS. So Jenny, over to you.
Thank you, Mark. That's great. Those polls are really helpful as well, because it really gives us an understanding of the delegates who are listening and their understanding on what we're obviously going to be discussing. I mean, GDS, Peter, is quite a large part of this, isn't it? And we can't ignore GDS because they've been a large part, because we started talking about Agile DS back in about 4 or 5 years ago, didn't we? Digital services.
Yes.
And it's grown in its popularity and it's grown in the demand, hasn't it? And we based it on Agile PM, didn't we? That was one of the whole areas of where we started, but we soon learned that that wasn't enough, wasn't it, to link that with the GDS and their life cycle.
No, that's right, precisely. So you can't have one without the other, really. So as you were sort of suggesting up there on the Agile PMs, it's a great success of that as an Agile method, really taking off, and GDS and the work with gov.uk really making a great impact in the UK and increasingly abroad. But yeah, they both came together quite naturally.
Absolutely, and we should mention probably the GDS and who they are in relation to gov.uk, because we're leading the world, aren't we?
Well, indeed, yes. There's a UN survey done recently on the engagement. I think it was digital delivery and digital engagement. The UK ranked top of the world standings on both fronts, really, which is
that's fantastic. Excellent. That's fantastic. So during this process, we've really learnt a lot with working alongside GDS and looking at their life cycle. And we also obviously had the Agile PM life cycle, which is the world's leading certification in Agile project management. But what we wanted to do was try and link those two together, didn't we? So what we were looking at was the trigger to kind of start this whole evolution, if you like, of Agile DS, wasn't it?
Yes, that's right. So, I mean, one of the big challenges we faced was what looked like sort of a match made in heaven, so to speak.
Yeah,
with the, sort of,
that's right.
Agile PM seems a fairly rigorous Agile method, recognises projects, project management, and that therefore sat very well with the GDS idea of, well, the government idea of large, complex organisations on there. So it seemed like a perfect match to get people trained up. Also offered the accreditation that was widely recognised, great for continued professional development for the civil servants and people involved. But yeah, as you mentioned, things like the life cycle soon became a nightmare.
Yeah, that's right.
Exactly. And funnily enough, I came into this just providing some sick leave cover for somebody on a few days. But
and you stayed.
And I stayed, yes. Never quite escaped it. Yeah,
that's good.
So Agile Sphere were kind of delivering training to the Ministry of Justice at that point. And the courses seemed to work well, but there was that great mismatch on sort of come exam. What do you learn for exam day, and what did you do the following week when you took up your day job?
So it was something regarding the terminology, wasn't it, between Agile PM terminology and the life cycle in GDS. That was, we needed to kind of put a bridge between those, didn't we? We found out that quite early on, didn't we?
Yes, that's right. So I mean, if we look at the pictures or the images on that, they don't look alike. And in fact, if you did a word search between one and both of those, they actually have a word in common, never mind anything else. Fundamentally, they're trying to do much the same thing, but yeah, just common terminology is such an important part of that. And I think we underestimated initially how much of a leap that would be, and just caused unnecessary confusion. Not to say people weren't capable of making that leap, but it's unnecessary, wasteful confusion in the communication, really.
So then what we obviously did with those triggers, if you like, is really set out to work on Agile Digital Services so it stands alone, really, because that's what it needed to do, didn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So it did. I mean, initially we did a piece of work thinking that maybe we just need to tweak it slightly on there. But yeah, we've in fact done two rounds. The big thing we decided to do was do this in Agile style.
Yes.
Because almost historically, doing training courses, writing Agile books is a very waterfall thing to do. You get your editorial team and your examiners, and you lock them away in a room for months and months and months.
It can be until you break that cycle and go, no more, we're not doing that anymore. So what we did, obviously, we went through this whole alpha and beta series, if you like, and we really used user research to really find out what the user was thinking about this process and whether or not there was that demand. So in a way, that was the starting point, wasn't it?
Yes, it was really, yeah, because it was a good catch on the user research. I mean, Agile PM has a very big principle on focus on the business need, but not one mention of the user ever occurs during the whole course or anything else. It's just assumed, and the role of the user researcher is something that GDS really led the way on and sort of outperformed many of our private sector clients in doing so. And so we thought we'd better do the same thing. It's kind of unnerving. You do your course, and rather than just a couple of sheets at the end and say, how do you enjoy the course? You get somebody to come and train as a user researcher to interview them and analyse and assess things and feed it back to you. Quite scary.
Well, I guess there's lots of transparency there as well, isn't there?
Well,
and there needs to be, because the trust, the transparency, those Agile values were very apparent there as well. So obviously, yes, we worked with FutureGov, as you can see there on the display, and they were fantastic, weren't they? They really gave us that insight in what we needed. They
did really, yeah. So again, having people experienced in the user research and able to provide that independent perspective, but also have a really good understanding, as they did, of sort of GDS service design and those sorts of things as well. So yes, a really valuable role at every stage in the life cycle.
Okay, so that was like the alpha, really. Yeah. That was the user research, then into the alpha, and then through to the betas, and then we continued through. So then it was a case of obviously talking to organisations and really building that demand, wasn't it?
Yes, that's right. So I suppose to take one step back and clarify, well, one of the decisions we made was to use the GDS style life cycle, Discovery, Alpha, Beta, Live, and to not use the Agile PM life cycle. So on their idea, yes, just sort of testing your constraints, testing at a very high level conceptually what you're going to be doing in your alpha. Just carried out the user research. Was there a demand for certification? To which the answer came out to be yes. Was there a demand to keep following the GDS style? The answer was yes. Was there a need to keep that project management wrapper around it? The answer turned out to be yes.
That's right.
So then we're into the stage of what we call the private beta and GDS and DS terminology, which is actually testing out some of the stuff for real, but with a limited audience.
So then a couple of years ago, I guess APMG came on board with us as well, didn't they?
That's right.
And so they got very excited about the product and the opportunity that it was coming together. And through this process, obviously the handbooks come together now. which is out there, which is fantastic. So the actual course and everything at the moment is in public beta, isn't it?
That's right, yeah.
So we've come through a huge cycle of development, really, haven't we?
We've done two rounds of that. In fact, we initially planned out to have a private beta, then a public beta. But in proper Agile style, we discovered we got it wrong the first time round. The first private beta, so sort of relaunched, changed quite a few things. We felt significantly enough to launch another private beta again to test it with a limited audience. But you mentioned the APMG link. That's been great as well, because when we discovered we needed accreditation, if we're going to follow the private beta lifecycle, it has to be the real thing in real live use. And if you're offering an accredited course, you can't just say, well, here's a training course, but there aren't any exams.
Absolutely.
So getting APMG on board, helping out and buying into that Agile approach was vital.
The other thing I think we should mention is, although it's a very young product, I mean, it's our youngest product with the Agile Business Consortium currently, but there's already been myths that have been circling about it and that have been kind of developed. And I think one of those myths is the fact that it's only for public sector, and that's not the case, is it?
No, that's right. The more we looked at it, we realised there's sort of several layers to this onion, as it were, that the central government in the middle with GDS, but increasingly local government, NHS, were picking up these things. But the more we looked at it, we realised that following from that private sector suppliers to the government, but actually any large organisation faces much the same challenges with governance, with control, and certainly when you're facing off to end users, to the man on the person on the street. Where GDS will talk about, citizen over government, we increasingly find large organisations face that challenge of sort of end user or private user consumer versus the organisation. So principally, it can be used by any of these organisations.
Absolutely. So we need to break that myth, don't we? We need to say it's not just a public sector thing, as you've so eloquently put there. So let's look at the principles within Agile DS then, because through this process, the whole development process, we learned a lot. I think it's fair to say, isn't it? We learned a lot about doing the whole life cycle in the GDS kind of style, as it were, the alpha, beta and live. But also, I think we learned a lot about putting this together and working a system like we've done. And so we went through this process, didn't we? And these principles kind of came about through that process.
Yes, it did indeed. So, I mean, fundamentally, they are the principles as designed by GDS, but we took the opportunity to test those. So, in a way, doing independent testing for them and their approach. And the closer we looked at it inside the public sector and outside, these just seem to resonate and reflect the excellent work they've done so far there. I mean, we're not going to go through them. They're all there for you to look up, research and circulate it afterwards. But again, the idea of start with needs, that focus on the user, fairly much common tool to the Agile PM to the DS approach.
Yes,
but we found
very similar in a way, aren't we?
We found the terminology and the slightly sort of more light-hearted, you might want to say, approach in a way, was sort of gelled, resonated with the audience somewhat more than the Agile PM was where we got to with that.
Okay. Well, it was a learning curve for us, really, I think it's true to say, because it was the first time we'd done that alpha, beta and live.
Yes, that's right.
And I think it's kind of there to stay for a few now, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think so, yeah.
So let's look at the handbook content then, because obviously we've developed this handbook. It's packed full of information. If you're looking to digital services, how you actually go about it, and obviously it runs alongside the course as well, doesn't it?
That's right, yeah. So it's designed effectively to run in both modes, really. It's a standalone handbook that you can use, you can buy, you can use, but any of the training course also is based upon it. So anyone going on a course would receive and use that book. And we'll come a little bit more when we come back to talk about exams afterwards. The content, the next level down, again, without drilling into each line, is done as just one pass through. Anyone knowing Agile PM, whereas we designed that as an introductory foundation level for anybody. And then a second section to the book, the digging deeper, more for the project manager only. But we found, initial findings were we had a minority of project managers on our training. It was for everybody. But the research, again, showed that they really wanted the whole team to get properly engaged. Every single person involved needed to understand the sufficient detail, which sort of went a bit beyond the foundation before. So we needed to give everybody quite a lot more information. So that's reflected in the layout. It's just a single pass through in a reasonably organised way. I say reasonably organised because, in fact, they're slightly cyclical. There's no natural order.
Right.
You've got to always go back and look at different sections. But the best order we have to make most sense to people going through one by one is sort of through the principles right down to our quality assurance at the end there.
And obviously roles and responsibilities are there as well, which is obviously very much an Agile PM thing, but they're quite similar, aren't they, those roles?
Yes, that's right, yeah. So in fact, what we've done in this case, we've actually focused very much on the responsibilities rather than the roles on there. One quick thing, because we've got a slide to show in a moment, but just briefly on the appendix. As you can say, so the other change we've made is historically the handbook has had quite a lot of information, and a lot of the appendixes, classic sort of style of put more information, lots of information in the appendix to be useful, which is great. But increasingly we found people are actually using the internet for it.
Right,
so instead we're going to cut right back. It's a slimmer book.
Right.
The book's smaller, the appendix is smaller, saying actually why write lots and lots and lots of content in the appendix which will become outdated.
Yes.
When in fact, in reality, people are just going to go and Google it or search online for some more information. So again, some of the key stuff covered, but a bit more signposting of things you can go and look up further.
Okay. Now, as we've also mentioned, this is out there currently going through a public beta, and there's like news on it. I mean, people are actually applying this currently, aren't they? You've been training it now for a good month or more, haven't you, in your status? So I mean, what's the latest on it? That would be really interesting to know.
So relief is it's going very well, because I did some of the early private, along with not just myself, the initial private betas and realised we got it wrong.
Yes.
Second private beta, felt we got it right.
Yes.
But the fear is always you get to the point of saying that you go to public beta and you still got it wrong.
Yes.
But no, the early feedback on that.
Well, I guess then you stop, don't you? When you do that, you shouldn't have got that far, surely.
Shouldn't have, yeah. So we would have got it somewhat wrong there.
There's some research that's gone awry.
So it's got to be possible.
Fair enough.
But yeah, so in fact, even then, that's included public sector organisation plus the suppliers. There's a relatively small startup organisation up in the northeast. Is doing some training. They're going to be providing digital service development to public sector and private sector clients. And they've been one of the early adopters of that. And
Fantastic.
in fact, they take on young graduates, train them up to be developers. And the most recent course, it was day 2, a new intake came out of university, and day 2 of their employment was starting the Agile DS course. So
that's amazing. That's fantastic.
Drop in and do that.
And then I believe the north of the country is taking over on this demand at the moment.
It is at the moment, yeah. Keeping it drawn up. Yes, we've got Hull, Sheffield, Manchester, Newcastle, I think, are all in the frame.
Well, you mentioned Newcastle because obviously they were in there for the Alpha, weren't they, right at the start? So Newcastle
That's right,
City
yes,
Council,
Newcastle City Council, yes.
And Ministry of Justice.
Ministry of Justice, yeah.
That's right,
yes.
yeah, that's right.
Yes.
So it was very well tested right in Alpha, really, wasn't it, right at the start? I mean, we had 2 huge organisations looking into it and helping us with that process.
So it's a very early stage just of them, and then we widen that net out to a good dozen or more organisations through the private beta, and again, local government, central government, other organisations, and again, taken through the whole course.
That's right.
I mean, that was the interesting leap of faith, just briefly on there, that the reason it was a beta, it wasn't quite ready, is rather than a nice, big, perfect bound handbook. We had sort of spiral bound books that hadn't been proofread, but with a disclaimer on the front. You know,
that's right.
You're getting it early, but there's spelling mistakes, there's typos.
That's right. And
the pictures are hand drawn. But, help us make it better.
Absolutely, and I can remember doing that. But in the essence of it, it was a developing concept. It was a developing product, and it was probably the best way to do it in a lot of ways, wasn't it?
Yes.
It was different for us in a way, because usually we like to present a finished product and it's all done. But it made a lot of sense in this respect because we were going at it a new way as well. Yeah. So we were learning in that process, and the demand was just growing, and we wanted people to try it out, didn't we?
Yes.
So in a very agile way, it was like, well, it's not completely finished, but here it is, and see how you get on with it. And we require feedback, which is that whole alpha, beta, and live process.
That's right. And it worked really well. In fact, they were really engaging courses, because there's almost, you don't realize how much of a barrier it is. You see a perfect book in front of you, you feel it's a done deal, so you can't really change it much.
You can't tear the page over or something, or put like a bookmark in it, or fold the page or something.
It looks
start writing all over it.
Got a chance to, you feel engaged, and people gave lots and lots of feedback, like I've never seen before in the course.
Oh, really? Oh, well, that was fantastic.
So it's almost an invitation to get involved by making it look less than perfect.
I think so. And it's interesting, like you say as well, that obviously this book is thinner than some of the other handbooks as well. So it's a new way, this one. It broke boundaries for us, really, didn't it?
But hopefully never to go back.
No, I don't think it will. I think when we get to live, which we're very close to obviously now, and I think people are going to be coming in from this from all over. Yeah. And it's a very exciting time for digital services, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
it really
is indeed. So,
yeah.
And let's see. Feels like we've definitely got it right, and hopefully the public beta. And again, we just need to do enough of that to make the final changes, and then it can go into the full live mode, as it were.
Okay, so that's obviously the digital services life cycle. So before I pass over to Mark to obviously talk about the accreditation side of things, Mark, are you there? Is he there?
Yeah, still here, Jen. Yep.
Hello, hi. Do you want to talk about the accreditation side of things? Because obviously we've covered off the reason why it all came about and that kind of thing. Although what we could do is actually look at the service project, really, couldn't we, I think? So yeah, if we can just go on to that and the target audience, I think that would be really helpful. And then we'll come back to the accreditation in a minute.
Okay.
So please, let's talk target audience for a minute then. So we've discussed, obviously, it's public and private sector, it's both. It's helping organisations and individuals, and it's very scalable, obviously, as well, isn't it?
Yes, that's right.
But the target audience came about through the testing, I guess, really, and the demand that was growing from that, didn't it?
Yes, it did. I mean, it's driven, GDS and the government digital transformation have made a huge difference to that in creating demand. But that's whole digital story is the same in private sector organisations. And it's almost going full circle when Agile started its life in software development and became more and more generalised. And Agile PM almost reflects that. And it's worth stressing, Agile DS does not replace Agile PM. They sit side by side, and Mark will talk a bit more about that.
Yes,
but they tackle different markets. Agile PM is sort of agile for anything, project management, not necessarily any software whatsoever. But if you're doing digital services, you're invariably developing websites, apps, other things. At its very heart, there's lots and lots of software development in a true Agile style. So it's almost going full circle back to the original sort of Agile. So again, we'd say any organisation is looking to engage in that digital style with their customers, their consumers, their stakeholders.
Okay, well, that's interesting.
They can start using it.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's look at the multi-service project element then. And I think we've got a slide coming up with, there we go, the multi-service project.
Yes, one of the findings was that the life cycle, Discovery Alpha Beta Live, is great in its own right, but in many cases, in the more complex organisations, you can't neatly segment out just a single service and just get on and do it. Again, part of the course, the balance of the course and the balanced approach of try and get it right. Don't just create a project just because you feel like it and assign a project manager, but where things do need to be put out together, then coordinating it. And the example I often use is borrowed from the Ministry of Justice, where if you use the sort of the verb form of services, that we say, okay, well, how do we divide up providing Ministry of Justice style services? If you think about a court case going in, your defender case and prosecutor case are two natural services.
Yes.
On there, used by two organisations or two groups of lawyers. But clearly, you can't do just one without the other. It doesn't sort of give you good justice to release a prosecution service before the defence service. You've got to have both coordinated in the right way. So at that point, we give advice, discuss, and get people engaged in thinking about the project structure, thinking about lifecycle coordination, but trying to avoid making it overly cumbersome. Okay,
we've had a few questions through actually, so let's link in some questions. One question is, do we really need another Agile framework? Differences with existing ones, please. So that's come in from a question.
So yeah, so
it's what you were saying, really, isn't it? The fact that this is for digital services, and it's different, isn't it, from other project frameworks, really? Yeah.
So what we're adding, so one of the things we've done is actually changed relatively little where we needed to. So a few things we have largely adopted from the GDS style of that is the life cycle, the principles, and so on. But where we're adding some more information is more specific guidance around that. Also the certification, the recognition, because that's a development. That professional development for people, and also the challenge and that way of training. There seemed to be a strong demand from, so the gap was really there. The additional precise guidance around the digital service, again broadening it out and spending some time to take it beyond. So if you say one of the key parts on the GDS side is a test with your minister, is an important part of that, probably decreasing over time. So removing some of those things, and also recognising that not trying to reinvent every level. So a lot of the things we talk about are then borrowed, because Agile is great at borrowing from everything, don't we? So XP, extreme programming, has given us lots of great concepts that pretty much everyone in digital services now does. So we'll spend some time covering those. Your team level interactions are largely Scrum based. So again, I know one of the giveaways was PRL as prioritized requirements list as Agile PM, and backlog is sort of the Scrum type terminology, and saying actually, in this world, Scrum's taken over, let's call it a backlog. So we try to keep it as closely aligned and keep all the good bits of any other methodology, and not, it's a good question, not reinvent for the sake of reinventing, but say, how do we pull it together in a way that sits best with large organisations doing digital services? So it's quite a niche solution, but a very large niche for digital services. I think so. And also, I mean, we didn't necessarily start off to do a whole nother Agile framework, did we, in this respect? The demand kind of grew, didn't it? Yeah. And then we were trying to service that demand. Yeah, so we did think there was going to be a few tweaks, just a couple of changes, a few terminology changes, and all would be good. But the more we did the research and dug into it, the more we found the demand for putting the extra time and effort in to produce this.
No, I appreciate that. No, that's a good question though, because there does obviously seem to be a lot of agile frameworks out there, and some are talking the same language, and some are trying to be different, aren't they?
Yes.
So, yeah. We've got another question just come in. I understand that people look for more information online, and that it's known challenges in terms of accuracy. But how will that impact people doing the exam? Or maybe we can cover that one off when we're looking at the exam in a little bit more detail.
Yes, it can do, but it's a good question, so it's valid again. And we'll talk about the syllabus and what you'll be examined on. But yes, let's park that question when it comes in.
Okay, thank you for that, Sydney.
Yeah.
We'll definitely come back to that one. Another one that's just popped in. Does Agile DS include any themes on vendor management, where the development is the responsibility of the third-party vendor? That's a good question.
Yes, there's a good one. Only in very small part on there, so I'd say not specifically. And a bit about the procurement side is talked about, and the team and the responsibilities of the team, yes. But one of the other ideas, one of the demands, and this is a good question, plays into that, is the idea that there's a core of Agile DS that is meant for the whole team, and it's meant to give everybody enough knowledge to work effectively as that whole team. But the further demand seems to be for some additional specific add-ons to go to them. So, digging, for example, in more detail into Agile testing. Things like that will only be relevant to testers. And again, contract management, procurement, and vendor management are three key areas that have come up as well. So we want, but again, the whole team doesn't necessarily dive into that in great detail.
No, sure.
So we're looking to sort of do some further research and launch some further versions on that. So, but yeah, it's obviously a significant challenge that starts with the wrong type of contracting, wrong type of procurement, and also tackles that. I suppose one of the other things, just going slightly to a tangent, but one of the hopes is, again, having a method that's widely applicable as well will help people get more of a sort of a common language and a terminology. And we're talking to some private sector suppliers who are looking to adopt this for their private sector developments, but they also have public sector wings that say, well, if we start adopting this as our method of developing it, we'll actually speak the same language.
It makes sense.
There,
I think we have to. I think language is so important. It's like it confuses people so easily if you're using the wrong language, but you're meaning the same thing. I just think we need to, across the Agile community, I think really just come together with our language. I think it would be such a lot of ease for understanding, because there's still people out there that are kind of in the dark in their understanding, and we need to help them definitely. Just one more question then, and then I think we should go back to some of the roles and responsibilities and that scaling element that we were talking about. What role do you envision an Agile DS practitioner playing in digital transformation in terms of applying the framework itself?
Yes, so a couple of levels to that. I mean, there's two levels which we'll come back to briefly, but the foundation, the practitioner level, so that they'll have a good level of understanding in the Agile DS, the ability to apply that against given approaches, given situations, case studies, and so on. There's a couple of other things in the wings that will help. Will that fully equip them to do that? Probably not. A couple of other things in the pipeline. One, a more general consortium development around Agile coaching that is relatively generic and helping people with the tools and the skills to carry out that sort of coaching transformation function on there. And the other side is some work underway to look at if we look back through DSDM Agile PM, there have been some additional levels of accreditation that work around train a coach to get yourself accredited on there.
Right.
Sort of more oral exams, a deeper application of those. And again, so there's plans to look at more the next level of accreditation up that will help you equip people better for that. But it should give them a good sound basis, but as I say, won't do quite all of the work yet.
Okay, all right, no problem. Well, let's go back on to let's carry on where we were then. I think that would probably be the best idea, won't it? We were on the target audience. Obviously, we've discussed that, and we were also looking obviously at the scalability of it and the roles and responsibilities, which I think we've covered now, in all honesty. So, Mark, if you're there, let's start talking now about the syllabus and the certification route.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Jenny. Thanks, Peter. Sure, that's given our attendees a good overview of the background to it and the content. So let's take a look at the supporting training and certification program. So we've got a preview of the syllabus there. But Peter, tell us about the typical course structure, what's involved, what's covered.
Yeah, so the course structure is based fundamentally off the handbook, and that from a syllabus point of view, the key areas. Groups are from a syllabus perspective. That's probably fairly transparent to the person attending the course. It would typically be taking you through the handbook from beginning to end with appropriate agile exercises, either standard or tailored by the training provider on there. But again, with a view to get you at foundation level, which we'll talk about in the question styles, but just in brief principle, foundation level is, do you understand, can you recall, do you have a good grasp of the concepts of it? And the practitioner level, can you apply those? And again, there's a couple of approaches people can take. Some organizations, and in fact my personal approach I quite enjoy using is doing both together, so you get people all the way through to the end, because most of our customers said they want everyone to get practitioner level, but sometimes it is a matter of covering at a slightly lesser level, just the whole of the content, just to get you down to the foundation level, and then the option of continuing to the practitioner level.
Great, thanks, Peter. And my next question was going to be, there are 2 levels of certification available, which you've covered, and we've got those on screen there. So finally, on training and certification, if you were to summarise the learning outcomes, Peter, how would you go about that?
Yes, the learning outcomes again are based around those. The 2 fundamental things from an exam point of view are to be able to understand what you do on the foundation level, practitioner level on there, what I say described as the objective testing format. In fact, they are both multiple choice exams. And this, playing back to the previous question, where does the internet versus the handbook come into it? It is stressed to people on there that the exams are based upon the handbook content and the core content, not even the appendixes alone. The first exam is closed book, so no access to anything else, and the second exam is open book, but only the handbook with no additional info added into it. So again, they're not sort of given the unnecessary temptation or even the opportunity to sort of delve into the internet on there. But what we've tended to try and do, therefore, is just briefly signpost some areas and say, this is one you ought to be aware of, but we're not going to discuss it in detail. So if we take things like DevOps as a sort of a type of responsibility, we're saying be aware of it, it vaguely does this. Right. Go away and research the detail. Yeah. We're not going to examine you on that. That's the idea. So I hope it gives a good 2-stage approach, but a fairly clear, and it makes them closed-ended, because yes, if you open it up to the whole internet and say you've got to learn the internet by Friday, it's going to be a bit scary.
Slightly.
Okay, fantastic. So that's the training and certification aspect covered as well. So thanks for that, Peter. Before we look at any remaining questions as well, I thought we ought to highlight the fact that Agile DS is the latest addition to the Agile Business Consortium and APMG family of Agile guidance and training and certification programs. So family's on screen now, and you can see Agile DS joins existing products, Agile PM, Agile BA, and Agile PGM, so PM being project management, BA business analysis, and PGM program management. And this slide, if I just go one forward, so this just gives a summary of the arrangements behind each of the products, and to summarise, the consortium develops and publishes the handbooks, or what we'd call the core guidance. We at APMG then develop a syllabus and exams in partnership with the consortium, and APMG then accredits a network of accredited training providers that offer training services to end users. So that brings us to any remaining questions. Jenny, you've been keeping an eye on those. Have we got any others that we haven't addressed yet?
I'm just looking, actually. We've done quite well, actually, filtering them through. Somebody wants to know a bit more about GDS. So, Peter, if you can explain a little bit more GDS, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, yeah, GDS, or Government Digital Services, is was set up after a review. Martha Lane Fox was called in from lastminute.com to do a review of sort of government websites and that great diversity. And rather than sort of do a quick polishing exercise, they produced a fairly radical change in the way of working and the setup of Government Digital Services. At its heart, if you go on to any website that ends .gov.uk, which is sort of the main government portal now, so one single place to get on there. And there's certain regulations. If you're of a certain size, whatever, you have to go on there. So if you're renewing your passport, your driving license, you'll do that through .gov.uk. And GDS, on the one hand, are sort of custodians of that site. They run reviews and they ensure that people are working the right way, have done enough user research, adhere to the principles, and do all that good stuff, which is made for a very consistent and very effective user-centered service on there.
Absolutely. I think it's worth mentioning as well regarding the gov.uk website. It's phenomenal, really, because it took 1,884 separate websites into one single website, which is the gov.uk. So no wonder GDS is, or gov.uk is kind of ahead of its time, because it's winning all those accolades, because it's amazing that now that website, the gov.uk website, is visited more than 3 million times every day. So yes, it's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
And they did that in 10 weeks, I believe, to get to the alpha stage.
Yes, that's right, to get that first round.
With their life cycle of the alpha, beta, and live. So, yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? There's a similar path, really, in lots of respects. But what they've achieved with that is just phenomenal, because we all just use it now, don't we?
Right, yeah.
You know, tax the cars and all that sort of thing.
Yeah,
it just happens.
So great ones. Yeah, taxing your cars, renewing your passport. And I had one the other day, just went into renew one of the family passports. You go and take your photograph, and it prints out the old stuff. It gives you like a URL. You can type into the internet. So when you apply for your passport, you just enter that, and it magically uploads from the photo booth in Sainsbury's or wherever it happens to be.
It's incredible.
Onto your application form. Job done.
Digital services. It is amazing. It really is. Coming back to, obviously, Agile DS, we've had a question in from Wayne, actually. So thank you for your question, Wayne. Which core markets will it be available, and countries and translations? That's an interesting one. That's the future we're talking for Agile DS.
Well, that's right, yes. That's an interesting one, actually. I guess research and demand will tell us.
I guess so. I guess that will be how it will be. I mean, we're happy to put it together and translate it into all languages, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Currently, it's in English.
In English, that's right, yeah.
What do you think, Mark? Can you add to that? Obviously, I mean, I believe it'll all be regarding demand and who actually wants it, won't it, really?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you say, it's English initially. Effectively, we'll keep an eye on demand, because I mean, we have successes with our training partners around the world. So if something embeds particularly well in a particular country, then we'll get the demand from that side for a translated version and translated exams. So it's a case of English for now, and we'll monitor it as we go and respond as necessary, I guess.
Yeah, so it goes. I mean, and from my personal perspective, of the places I've had feedback from, had interest from, say, Australia and Canada, from sort of more from the general GDS side, and Scandinavia and Germany as well, from the general digital service side, and historically French. It's got a strong French for Agile PM, so there might well be a following for that on.
I can believe that, absolutely, and I'm sure it'll be very strong. We've had another one through. Obviously, we're in public beta currently, so if the certificates are achieved in public beta, will it change when the public beta is closed, or will they still be valid?
No, still valid. That's a good question, because that was took a bit of working between us and APMG to decide the best approach to that. But actually, when we looked at it, in reality, they still stand. Whether you've got your certificate of private beta, public beta, whatever else. When we looked at it, we said fundamentally you've done the same thing. Have you proved your sufficient recall of the method on there? Yes, we have. Have you proved your ability to apply that method? And where the changes were significant, it was in, say, the predominance of project management, for example, or which exact principles. In one case, we had two sets of principles rather than one, and we've whittled them down to one. So yes, there's a few things would be different. We're saying, does that fundamentally,
you shouldn't change anything,
really change. You've proven your ability, so we see them all as being sort of on an equal footing, as it were, for these.
Okay. And what happens after public beta, I guess? When will it be live, do you think?
Yes, we set aside we're looking at about roughly a 3-month window on there, but it's a slight juggling act to make sure we get enough. It's sort of the Goldilocks principle, right? Not too little, not too much. We need to get enough people through to be sure that we've done enough to get. And again, if we take the GDS and our own life cycle approach now, that we don't have to have finished everything by the time we go live. We have to have done enough.
Yes.
To make it worth going live. In our case, it's slightly more constrained. If you're doing it on a website, you can tweak more. Once we've produced a large amount of handbooks, it's slightly harder to change. So we probably need to do a bit more of the public beta before going live than we did a website. But I don't think there's going to be much fundamental from what I've seen so far. Nothing fundamentally changed. But there'll be some polishing of content, some clarification. Maybe a few bits shuffled around from core to appendix. And to a certain extent, it also gives a chance to test out the exam questions, which is great. So APMG have a great process for taking feedback on there. And so we have internal quality control, but clearly getting people to sit the exams and just check what may or may not make sense. And the questions will be refined. So it gives us time to do that as well.
Okay, fantastic. We've had another question in, Mark. I'm an Agile PM trainer and I'm interested in the exams. Can we take the exam?
Yeah.
So absolutely.
So, absolutely, yes.
That's right. So where can they find more information?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, on that one, I'd probably recommend just to get in touch with myself initially, and I can point you in the right direction. So, yeah, I mean, we always so for our existing training providers out there, we try and make it a smoother transition as possible to help you get onto the in this case Agile DS. So yeah, drop me a note. I'm sure you have my email address from the reminder emails and everything for the webinar. So yeah, drop me a note and I can point you in the right direction.
Also, yeah, I mean, regarding Agile DS, there's lots of information regarding digital services also on our website, on the consortium website. So there's videos on there. There's another webinar on there. There'll be this webinar as well. So it really is it's a hot topic at the moment, isn't it?
And the interesting thing to notice from a trainer perspective, and from anybody else's perspective, actually, what we found is that there's sufficient difference between Agile PM, which I've outlined from that sort of generic project management focus down to the digital service focus.
Okay.
To say it is a separate course worth doing, and from a number of our civil service colleagues are saying actually that kind of meets the criteria for further CPD, continuing professional development.
Yes.
Say I'm accredited in Agile PM, and 1-2 years down the road, I want to reaccredit or gain an additional accreditation, should we say, in Agile DS, and run the two together as sufficiently different to be recognised and to be worth doing.
There's a question that's come in regarding the roles and responsibilities. And it may be worth us just flicking back to that one, Mark, if you don't mind, just so we can talk about it, because I think it's an important one. And we did kind of go past that one quite quickly, I think. So let's talk about the roles and responsibilities for a minute, Peter, as we've got 5 minutes or so to continue this. Let's break this one down a little bit more.
Yeah, so interesting that Agile PM put that idea forward of separating out roles and responsibilities and not necessarily making it a one-to-one relationship. But in fact, and particularly on exam day, it often turned out that the focus becomes on the role. So you do think about the job role. In fact, our early private beta did a similar thing. We talked about a delivery manager, a product manager.
Right.
And we increasingly find that sort of channels you down that route of thinking, I need to slot somebody in that space. So we've turned this right back around to say we want to think about the broad level responsibilities on there. In fact, the other challenge is that there's quite a lot of them. So you're then going to find, well, how do you spread that across a team? And
you dual role as well.
You can indeed, yes. So, yeah. So
you're right, there is quite a few there.
Quite a few on there. So again, when very large, complex services, particularly multiple services, yes, you probably would have somebody, a delivery manager assigned to a team or a couple of teams, and a person assigned the product manager role who's separate from those different roles and the service design. But you can. And in fact, in some cases, more than one person can do the job, so it can cut either way. One person can share responsibilities, just as long as they remember which hat they're wearing at the time they're doing the job, and where possible, or where appropriate, should I say, more than one person, particularly the service development, those sorts of jobs are on there. But we just say we want to be clear that we really believe those should be covered by somebody along there. Definitely. And so user research, clearly, if you're tackling a large citizen or large groups in the public sector, clearly expert user research, independent people bringing in is great. If it's actually a relatively small internal digital service, your user base might just be internal to your organization, so you may not need that level of skill, but you still want somebody to realize they're responsible for user research, representing that user appropriately on there. And so again, this is also a good case where we tend to signpost quite a lot of things and say, right, cover at a reasonable level of detail what each of these responsibilities are, which is actually organizationally. And if you look at how different people tackle it, some organizations have these well defined already. So we're not going to try and reinvent what a delivery manager does. No, sure. If your organization have one. But actually they might call them scrum masters or project managers in your organization. But as long as they're fulfilling that sort of list of stuff that we want those people to do, that does the job. So we feel this seems to have done well to say, let's turn it right around. So we think responsibilities. Whereas if we say we think responsibilities, but we talk roles, the roles get pulled to the fore. So it's that language, that terminology. So it's a subtle difference, but it seems to make a big difference.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense, actually. And they're all kind of equal in that respect as well, aren't they? Obviously, it's not like the alien baby like Agile PM. Sorry, we say alien baby, but it's just literally the roles and responsibilities, and it's that diagram, isn't it, for Agile PM that we're very familiar with.
That's right, which again has an innate hierarchy that once you add, because we do talk about governance within Agile DS as well, which is often overlooked. So we talk about the governance layer, the project management layer, and the delivery layer, but without hierarchically separating them quite the same way that Agile PM inadvertently, I think, did.
So can anything be added to that? Or
So
we think that's nice. And
it does seem to be from what we've seen so far.
Everything there,
yeah,
from the research and everything.
And I think within the detail level, there will clearly be different parts that you can put on there. But so, for example, service deployment is meant to cover sort of business and technical aspects of it as well. So if you're sort of into massive websites, then there's going to be some really specialist DevOps technical type roles. But don't forget your business deployment, your business change, those sorts of people as well. But in a very small team, it might be that your developers are able to do that whole job, and if a software developer can take the whole thing from beginning to end, or because of security restrictions, you may have different people along the way handling it. But but we believe at the high level that appears to have covered the key areas in a way that makes sense to people and gets the balance right.
And that's come through there from really strongly from the research as well, which is
that's right. Yes, and we've tried several different flavours of that, bigger and smaller, and more detailed, less detailed. And this is the one that gelled in the end.
Great. Oh, fantastic. Well, let's look at this just quickly also now through to multiple teams, obviously scaling up to multiple teams. So this works with a steering and leadership responsibilities in the centre now, doesn't it?
In the centre. So again, it's sort of tying up the imagery to the terminology and to the intent. So we said historically that we talk about servant leader or servant leadership as being a role. So in an agile world, your job is not to wield a big stick and make people work harder, overtime, more weekends, but to be the servant who will lead from within the team. But the diagrams always show this hierarchy. There's like a classic pyramid of the high-paid people on the top and the workers underneath or whatever. So again, visually, it's not a radical change. We're just trying to represent more clearly the steering and leadership on there. And often there's other phrases that people use, like governance as a critical friend on there as well, something in the middle, your servant leader, your critical friend.
Great.
So how do we, but making it clear that they are separate responsibilities. We need to call them out, give people responsibilities for them. And generally that's probably not done by people within the team.
Right.
In some cases you might get away with that, but just let's recognise most organisations with some level of the need some level of control at that level. So you've probably got somebody independent holding that responsibility.
Should we talk about the scalability of this as well?
Yes, again, what we've tried to talk about is, and we mentioned briefly in the different service teams, multiple service teams together. So again, when we look at these multiple responsibilities, we're more likely to try and map those to multiple services.
Okay.
Again, what we want to try and do from an agile perspective is not just add lots more people the whole time, playing a turn. If anybody recalls the great old book, The Mythical Man Month, that's dispelled the myth, or put it another way, and if it takes a woman 9 months to have a baby, how quickly can 9 women have a baby? And all too often people in software development think that's 1 month. If I give you more teams, you get it done quicker. So again, you want to steer people away from that.
Right. Okay.
But where it makes sense to deliver things in parallel, defend a case, prosecute a case, adjudicate a case, and the team focused on each of those, keeping coordinated makes great sense. But trying to divide, trying to throw too many people at it does not make sense. So we try and again guide people on that balance.
Right. Okay. Well, I think that's good. I think that was very worthwhile going over those roles and responsibilities in multiple teams as well. That makes a lot of sense. So I think we're covering the questions, in all honesty, Mark. I don't think there's that many more questions coming through at the moment. So if there is, please send them through and we're happy to answer them.
Okay, so we should begin wrapping up then, I guess. So what I'm going to do is put one final poll on screen for everyone, and Jenny and Peter, this is going to tell us how good a job we've done today, I guess. So final question, final poll question on the phone: have we whetted your appetite to find out more about the Agile DS guidance, training, and certification? It's encouraging so far. So we've got over 90% yes. Yes, yeah. So literally hovering around 90%. So that's very encouraging. So
that's fantastic. Well, thank you. That's great.
That's one of our principles in there. Do it with data. So therefore we've kept to that one.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's right.
So to close, thank you everybody for taking part in that final part, and that brings us to the end. So Jenny and Peter, thanks very much for your time and contributions today. It's really great teaming up with you on the webinar.
You're welcome. So thank you, Mark, for organising this and putting this together. And if anybody does need more information, obviously your website's packed full of information, our website's packed full of information. So I don't want people to kind of get lost. There's lots of information out there that people can gather up really on this. And they can experience it, can't they, Peter?
They can indeed, yes, as well.
Yeah, and it can really benefit them, I think.
I think so, yeah. From what we've seen so far, it really is good. But yeah, thank you, Mark, and thank you everyone for your time.
No problem at all. Thanks very much, guys. And finally, I'd like to thank everyone very much for attending. So we appreciate you taking time out to join us. I know there's a huge amount of competition for your time. So we're glad that you joined us this afternoon. And we hope it's been valuable and informative for you. So any further questions or need any further information, please don't hesitate to get in touch. You've got my details on the screen there, but also in the confirmation and reminder emails for the webinar. So thanks again, everyone. Hopefully we'll see you again on future webinars. And for now, enjoy the rest of your week. Bye now.